Hello and welcome. You're listening to Start Again with Shauna Lee, the place where you will be reminded that it's never too late and you're never too old to do the damn thing. So stick around if you're ready to vibe higher and be inspired to chase your dreams. Together, we will uncover your soul's truest desires. Now, if you're ready, let's get started. Hey, everyone. Welcome back to another episode. Well, I am going to introduce you to yet another author. We're going to learn about his process, but Kristof, thank you for joining.
Thank you, Shauna, for having me. You're very kind.
Absolutely. I am thoroughly loving this theme of talking to authors, especially first-time authors, to kind of hear about all of the thoughts that we have before we write that first book and how you kind of powered through that. So before we jump right in, why don't you tell everyone a little bit about yourself and how you've embraced this idea of starting again?
Shakespeare. I grew Shakespeare. I grew up in Texas, around the Houston area. I like to joke that I was born in the same hospital as Beyonce. Anyway, anyway. Yeah, and I'm 34. I was in the Navy. I'm an award-winning journalist and photographer, and fiction writer, short fiction and poetry writer. I've also won awards for that too. And when I was 27, I was diagnosed with Tourette's, and the way it manifested was benign at first. It seemed, but then it came to take over my whole life, and I didn't have a choice but to start writing again because I stopped writing for 5 years after my diagnosis, and then the work counselor who I had to resort to find work. She told me that she couldn't find me any that would Shakespeare that could accommodate me because of my condition, and so I started writing again, and then I wrote a book.
Well, first of all, thank you for your service.
Mm, Thanks, thank.
I love to hear kind of different stories and how people came to write. I think you're the first who wrote to kind of, it sounds like, come back to yourself and find your voice again. So, why don't you tell us a little bit about your book, The Second Son?
Well, in terms of its plot, it's actually it's an epic fantasy. However, I began my career writing, uh, trying to write something akin to literature. So in my work, I took it really seriously, and I tried to discuss things that I thought were serious and contemplative. And even and actually, when I was 22, I wrote a short story that the editors of the New Yorker told me that my work was my narrator's voice was quite compelling in a short story I'd written. I tried to submit to them because I have no shame.
I love it.
And,
I love it.
and so my work now is meant to be something of a repudiation of what many I know what is the prevailing view in people that write that try to write literature, that epic fantasy is not a genre that can accommodate uh, literature. It can't be taken seriously, and so my book itself is a is actually about this. It's structured similar to Game of Thrones, and the first three chapters are about three different parts of the world with different sets of characters, and then you learn how those characters are related. And the first chapter begins with a little boy named Moo, because Moo is I named him Moo because I thought it would be funny.
I love it.
Um, I thought it would be funny if it were considered a work of literature, which it is actually. I learned that it's recommended reading in a class studying
That's
Charles
incredible.
Dickens. No, recently someone told me that on the internet. They just randomly messaged me. Or they wrote on Instagram. They told me. I was like, wow, my dream come true. My dream come true, and someone with a really funny username is the one that told me. Anyway, but it's about a paradise. The first chapter is about a paradise that exists, and how when you die, you can be reborn as like a tree or a plant, whatever you choose. And it's meant to be an allegory for the way that older generations now live in a sort of financial paradise. um, with their chosen few, while and you can't go to this paradise unless you're welcome, and everyone else out in the outside world is experiencing, empire and slavery and pirates and extraordinary violence. Yeah, it's meant to describe the way that our dynamic right now. That there's,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but you come to discover that, of course, the paradise can be encroached upon by the problems of the world, uh, and so that's really it, basically. Yeah, and you learn from there what's going on.
Well, it sounds fascinating. And you've already described kind of this imposter syndrome that I have heard most writers kind of go through, which is, will my work be taken seriously? Will anybody read what I've written? And clearly, you've discovered the answer to that question for you is yes, people are reading what you've written. So tell us a little bit about the process to write the book and how you discovered that this story was something you had to tell.
Well, I think one of the things that you as a writer, I think, is a necessary ingredient or component is humility, and that is that after a certain point, you're no longer a creator; you're more of a passenger.
Mhm.
And so the process began with me writing uh, the first three chapters, and realizing that I was writing the first three short stories, kind of. And since I had been writing short stories my whole career, I, that really I really did I enjoyed that part, and I feel like I did it well. I could do it well. And so I wrote, and during the first draft, I wrote a lot a day. I wrote about 5,000 words a day.
Oh,
Um,
wow. That is a lot.
some days, well, I remember one day actually, which is not. It's just not a flattering figure. I think it sounds like but the thing is, the trouble is that how much quality can you really derive from 5,000 words?
Yeah,
And so
yeah.
now, like on a very healthy day, um, and with prose that is substantive, and worthwhile, I can write maybe on the best day I can write 2,000 words.
Yeah, yeah.
And so now I write between about 1,000 and 1,500 every day.
Okay.
Uh, so the first draft was 162,000 words. For people that don't know, The Hobbit is 98,000.
Yes.
So it took me less than 3 months to write the first draft. So I was working very very diligently.
Yeah, to get that many words out on paper, uh,
Hmm.
in 3 months, that is substantive.
Yeah, and so then after Shakespeare, the first rewrite uh, took me more than a year and a half, I think, to actually to complete the rewrites of it. Uh, much more careful and deliberate.
Hmm.
And the book is now about 225,000 words.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Mm.
Well, so what surprised you most about this journey of yours to become an author?
What surprised me most? Mm. You know what? To me, I think the words Shakespeare, the words add up really quickly. If you keep working, John Steinbeck actually said if you write a page a day, you'd be surprised by the end of 400 days, you have 400 pages. In my book, right, the
Hmm.
the volume 3 that I'm working on right now is 410, and
Oh, wow.
I started in March of last year. The words add up, and then people are really impressed with when you write a book. It's I don't, but the thing
Isn't
is,
that funny?
yeah, regardless of the quality or anything,
Yes.
they don't. Yeah,
Yes.
it's just
It
the
doesn't
fact
matter
that
if
you've
they've
written
never read
one.
it at all. They're like, "Wow, you wrote a book?"
Yeah.
And I wrote a self-help book, so I feel like, if we're talking about genres,
Hmm.
it's I mean, it's not literature, right? And so I'm like, well, okay, I wrote this self-help book. But it doesn't matter. People are like, "Wow, you wrote a book?" And and I think this is where, I've heard anybody who's done something big or incredible, and they will all say, if I can do it, you can do it. And that's exactly how I feel about writing a book. If I can write a book, anybody can.
Hmm. Yeah, um, it takes a lot of attention. It is discipline. It's very it requires a
Mhm.
lot of discipline, and of course, it depends, I think, on the genre. Because if you write like William Faulkner, which is more, I think he does a stream of consciousness thing, and As I Lay Dying, and you're less beholden to details. But nonfiction is
Mhm.
one of those things that is, so it depends on the genre. Yeah,
It
it is.
does. It does. I just think it's like with any big project,
Mm-hmm.
there is a plan to get you there. It takes discipline, it takes
Mm-hmm.
perseverance. You have to, day after day, show up to do the thing,
Mm-hmm.
but it's possible.
Yeah.
I guess is my theme to that. And I think you're hitting on something that's really important that I've heard a lot of authors talk about, which is this daily focus and committing to a daily habit of you write every day.
Mm-hmm.
You just write. And I think for me that's what I've always told people, the difference between someone who wants to write a book and an author is one did it.
Yeah.
One showed up and wrote and did it.
Mm-hmm.
And that really is the difference.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we could of course debate nuances of different genres and who is, you know, more esteemed than another, but at the end of the day, it's completing a project.
It's the difference that you make in someone's life. I think is
Exactly.
uh, the most important uh, product in the end.
It's true. It's true. I mean, what is the purpose of the book or the story that you have to tell? And, those can be different. That can be entertainment, it can be life changing. I interviewed a lady recently who wrote this book about coming out of trauma. And for her, it was about truly changing people's lives and teaching them that they can leave these abusive relationships. So it just depends on what is the purpose of your story, I think.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I've made I have like a whole group of friends now that I've made because of the book. They've read it and they reached out to me, and that, like, it's extraordinary, and they tell me all the time that because they know I struggle with like mental health stuff. And they tell me all the time that I changed their lives, and that that they used to feel lonely, and now they have a whole group of people, and we all hang out all the time, and it's so fun.
Yeah.
And
And to think you wouldn't have known that entire group of people had you not heeded the call and written the book.
yeah, and how many nights I laid in bed and cried myself to sleep because I wondered if anyone was going to read my work. Mm.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, I love that you've introduced the topic of mental health. Listen, we talk about that a lot on this show. I am all about positivity and, inspiration. But would you mind if we addressed your diagnosis a little bit?
Yeah.
I can't remember exactly what you said in your intro to me. I think we connected on Podmatch, which I love this service, by the way. It
Oh, me too.
connects me
Yeah.
to all sorts of incredibly brilliant people.
Yeah. Alex and them are great.
But you said something about being funny and comical, and I was like, oh, this is going to be a fun conversation. But tell us a little bit more about maybe your diagnosis and when that happened and what that was like for you.
Shakespeare. Well, Tourette's syndrome, for people that don't know, a syndrome is a pattern of symptoms where the underlying cause is unknown. Uh, and so the pattern for me is I have Shakespeare. I have OCD, ADHD. Um, I'm on the autism spectrum, of course. I have let's see, all of them. Oh my God, I'm trying to remember them
All
all.
of them,
OCD,
all the things.
ADHD, um, depression, anxiety, uh, but anxiety and OCD are the ones that I feel like I struggle with the most.
Mm.
Um, Tourette's, uh, Tourette's has been the most uh, transformative thing in my life, for good or for ill. Um, it ruined my life in many ways. Like I'm not married anymore.
Mm.
I was married, and then yeah, and Tourette's really messed that up. Shakespeare.
Well, listen, my whole show
Mhm.
came because of I have been divorced 3 times. Um, and it was kind of the pivotal transformation for me in my life after the third divorce. I was like, holy shit, like, talk about massive failures. I've got 3 failed marriages. And working through that for me, um, part of me coming through that was I see people struggle with one divorce and I'm like, shit, I've had 3. So listen, if I can go do something with it, then I think we're going to get you through this one.
Mm.
Um, but being able to realize there was a purpose behind it for me, I think was what was most helpful. And so that's why I ultimately wrote my book and then started this show. But it was because every time I highlight someone else's story, like yours, and talk about the incredible things that they've done after these moments of like, oh my God, what now? It's so powerful. One, it gives you your power back, but and it's valuable and healing for you to share your story. But more than that, for people to hear your story and to see themselves in your story and then to be inspired to go do whatever it is that they've been wanting to do. I think that's where the really incredible thing is. So I totally cut you off. But all of that to say, I hear you and I feel you on the divorce aspect.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. I was very much disillusioned of
Hmm.
the notion of purity and pure love. Um, it for myself and for anyone else, you know. I realized how destructive um, that absolute was. Like
Hmm.
holding yourself to that absolute was just delusion. Um, yeah, because Tourette's there's growing pains when you're disabled, when you have a disability. You are learning what you're capable of doing and what you're not,
Hmm.
and those things sometimes change uh, as it progresses. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm glad I've done my work. Yeah.
Well, and after going through challenges and struggles, if we could, call all of that something as simple as challenges and struggles, um, what advice would you give the younger you?
Hmm. The maintenance of your spirit, um, and your will to move on. Like, the thing is that I know that my generation and those after me, there's a s an extraordinary amount of uh, pessimism, cynicism, because they know what world they're coming into and what all of the experts say about our future planet and that sort of thing. And frankly, like you can talk the finance minister of Greece. I don't know if he's a former finance or if he's the current one. He said, that we're basically living in an age of where we're not calling it we call it capitalism, but it's really a sort of feudalism. And then in the 1770s, we had already it said it was still a kind of feudalism then. It was called feudalism, but really it was capitalism that had taken over. It was taking over, and so now we're in this age where it's the reverse, and and the planet is like just a lot of really cataclysmic situations going on, and so you have to do what you want to do. You have to do you have to do the work though. So if you want to do what you want, like if you're gonna do something and not do anything else, then make sure that you do whatever you want to do well. Do it well.
I love that.
Mm,
I mean, out of the darkness, we see our light. Like
mm,
it's essentially saying commit to it, right?
mhm,
If this is what you love, this is what's calling to you, this is what's going to make you happy, which
mhm,
I do believe should be everybody's focus. And that's, I think, the downfall. So a lot of people in my generation, the Gen Xers, um, we we weren't we were disillusioned plenty, don't you worry. But
Mhm.
I think we bought into what I don't see the younger generations buying into, which was this idea of I have to go to school, I have to follow the path in order to quote unquote be happy. And so we all did that to our demise, and then
Mhm.
we get to, midlife and
And look where
realize,
it got
well,
to.
shit, that didn't make me happy. And so I think that's where this is my theory on midlife crisis, which I don't think we'll see in younger generations, because I think they're having these quarter life crisis moments where they
Mhm.
are discovering much earlier than we did, hang on a second, this is a load of bullshit I'm being fed.
Yeah.
And so I think the secret really is doing what makes you happy,
Mhm.
but yes, commit to it and do it well. And the the money or the worries that that's what capitalism, that's the fear it fuels. Um, that all works itself out. But do what makes you happy and commit to it. And I think that that's what I pulled from what you were saying. Anyways, I
Mhm.
think that's sage advice.
Well, it's worked out for me so far. I'm much happier now with and more fulfilled as a person.
Yes. Yeah, and I think that's the people who have done it, they all say the same thing, right? It's
Mhm.
working out, because I think the details do work out. But it's the fear of, but how am I going to earn some money by painting or whatever the thing is that they want to do? Um,
Mhm.
anyways, I love that. I love that, and it comes out in just about every conversation I have. Well, so when you look forward to what comes next for you, what do you now believe is possible for your own life?
Oh my god. Um, well, it depends on, how much delusion of grandeur you're willing to tolerate on this show.
Oh, all
So,
of it. I'm
yeah,
here for
because
all of it.
I actually had I had a conversation recently. I had Shakespeare. I had a conversation with a VA with a VA, disability counselor,
Hmm.
and, mm, I was like, "I think I might be suffering from delusions of grandeur that have not been helpfully repudiated." And, I haven't had
Yeah,
anybody tell
yeah,
me otherwise. I'm
yeah.
Shakespeare. I submitted for the International Indie Book Awards, which is gonna be, that contest is decided in 2 months, in less than 2 months. It's a month and a half, a little bit
Okay,
from
okay.
now. Um, and I'm submitting for this is gonna sound really silly. I know this is gonna sound outrageous. That's fine. I'm submitting for the Pulitzer Prize for my work,
Good for
which
you.
I know it sounds absurd, but, actually, I worked with I had for a while, I worked with a Pulitzer Prize winning writer, who won in
Hmm.
fiction, Robert Allen Butler. He won it in '93, I think, for A Good Scent from a Strange Mountain. I used to write him letters, um, invade his email, until
Uh-huh.
he wrote me back one day, and he was very kind and very patient with me, and I
Yeah.
was younger then, and I had less to say that was worthwhile, but I remember one thing the only thing that I remember, I think that I said that maybe impressed him was, I was describing my mental health as a parade of tired dancers.
Of tired dancers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm, and,
Man, I can relate to that.
yeah, mhm, and we were gonna do this whole writing, what is it called? Where a refuge sort of thing where you go to this fancy place
Yeah, yeah.
and you work
Like a
together.
retreat.
A retreat, there you go.
Yes.
We were gonna do that, and then he won the F. Scott Fitzgerald Award for Outstanding Achievement in American Literature and
Oh,
fell off
wow.
the map. So,
Oh,
I said yeah, I talked to him
it was
again a
like
few
his
years
mic
later.
drop moment.
Yeah, yeah, he was yeah, so he went on world tour and that sort of thing. Good for him. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, and so I'm trying to do something extraordinary. The people I've spoken with haven't told me I'm crazy. In fact,
Yeah.
they're more
Well,
confident than I am.
yeah, isn't that funny how that works out? No,
Mm,
I am always encouraging people to dream bigger than they're giving themselves permission to even think.
mhm,
Um, because here's what I've discovered about this whole award winning thing:
mm,
you have to throw your name in the hat in order for it to happen.
mhm,
and most people stop before they even put their name in.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I say aim big. What is that silly phrase they say? Shoot for the stars, you might end up on the moon. Like,
Yeah, even if you miss, you'll land upon the you'll shoot for the moon. Even if you
yeah,
miss, you'll land among the stars. If you here's the thing though,
yeah,
in terms of astronomy, the the closest star is far further away than the moon. The moon's like a hundred
yes,
and something miles away from Earth, and the stars are like the closest one's like 2,000 light years away or something, so or 200 light
yeah,
years away.
yeah,
It's some absurd number, which it's yeah. So if you land among the stars, you're doing hella good, okay?
yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah.
that's what I'm saying.
But you're not going to if you don't at least throw your name in the hat.
Yeah, and
So
the moon's way
that's
bigger
awesome.
target.
Okay, so when you win a Pulitzer Prize, you'll come back on the show and tell us all about it.
Yes, I would, if only to be vindicated, you know,
Y There you
just a
go,
little
there you go.
bit.
And, the other thing that you mentioned, people aren't telling you that you're crazy. I think the people we surround ourselves really, really matters.
Mhm,
And you wanna be in a room where people are cheering you on and saying, "Yeah, that sounds great, you should go do that." Instead of where most people find themselves, which is in a room full of people adding more doubt, asking more questions, saying why
mhm.
they can't do it. And if that's your experience, I think you're in the wrong room.
Yeah, I think it's a hmm. I agree with it. I agree with it in terms of sentiment. Sometimes, uh, but yeah, I think so. I think so. Yeah.
It's about the encouragement and the belief in what someone's capable of. I think if you're in a room full, especially when you're talking about writing, if you're in a room full of people who are asking you some thought provoking questions and that's going to get you to improve your writing and it's going to make your craft better,
Mhm.
that's great.
Yeah.
But asking questions that is just instilling this "you can't really do it" sentiment,
Oh,
I
yeah.
think is not okay.
I had a friend. I had a friend. The "had" is the
Exactly.
operative
See?
word.
Yes.
I had a friend who was I wrote him, that I was writing a book, and I showed him some excerpts, and, he just kept telling me, like, "So I'm not your target audience. Um, basically, I'm not really into this." And then he would say, "So if this doesn't do well, like, this doesn't seem like there's gonna be a big market for something like this." I was like, "Okay,
Yeah.
okay." And
Yeah.
then he would say that, yeah, when this do if this when or if this doesn't do well, are you gonna switch to a different series, or are you gonna keep doing this one? And I
Mhm.
was like, "Hmm."
Yeah. Well, and the thing about I've had my share of that sort of feedback, and in the moment, it stings a little because 'cause you're like, "Wait a second." But every time that I've stopped to say, "Hold on, is this person my demographic? Are they my target audience?" If the answer is no, then grain of salt with their feedback because they're not who I'm trying to reach. And
Mhm,
I think that's brilliant that he was able to say that in the beginning. I'm not your audience. Because most people in my experience have not even been able to identify that. And so they just come full force with their negative Nancy feedback. And I was taking a lot of that to heart, I think, in the beginning until I realized. So, my business is geared for helping women specifically after divorce, and we talk about all sorts of things.
mhm,
But when I was talking to a man to get feedback, or someone who is still happily married to get feedback on my business, or, someone that's not my demographic, their feedback, I was taking it personally. And I think that's when we have to just be able to sit back and say, hold on, are we asking the right people the questions
mhm.
before we sit with their feedback? You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, in my experience, the trouble is that men and women have very different experiences post-divorce. Very, 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 very different. I think it's, in my view, I've seen, it's a lot less, lonely for women than it is for men. That's what I've learned. I've discovered through,
Oh,
like, conversations with a lot of people, women and, and just I guess my own experience,
Hmm.
it is a very different world. It's very different. It sucks.
You're
Yeah.
hitting on something, um, because in all the men who've read my book, I've had a lot of divorced men pick up my book, and I'm like, "Oh, who are you buying this for?" And they're like, "For me." It's pink. It's like the prettiest divorce book you'll ever see. And I'm like, "What? Oh, okay." And each of them have said, the guidance you're giving and the advice you're providing is valuable to anybody going through divorce, because I think there are a lot of similarities for us. But what you're hitting on is something that I heard recently, which it was all about a study that had been done with people around the globe, and it was about life expectancies of men versus women, and trying to determine why life expectancy of men is lower. Primarily, they were talking about here in the US. And they discovered that there were some cultures around the world that they were similar, or men were living longer. And they were like, hold on a second, what's this about? And what they discovered was a sense of community.
Mhm.
And when men are surrounded and able to rely on, this is what women do really well here, right? We rely on each other. We talk about our feelings. We lean on each other when we need support. And I don't see men having that same experience. And I think that is what you're hitting on in this after divorce. Because listen, this period of time after you're, especially when you're newly divorced, is lonely for everyone. But it's better when you find your people and you can lean on them in those moments of feeling vulnerable. And I think that's probably what you were hitting on, that for men, it's harder to do that.
Well, yeah, I mean, um, I spent the first, I think, like 6 months trying to date, uh, really unsuccessfully. My ex did not have that experience. She's actually already married again, and
Mm.
it was a year ago that she left, that she separated, that she left the house, that she separated, that she's already
Oh,
married again.
interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, that is
Um,
less common, I will say.
yeah, and then there's a lot of, like, the women that I've spoken to that got divorced, they were talking about they were single for, like, a week before they had a
Whoa,
boyfriend or had a guy that they were.
interesting.
Yeah, and, I think there's a number of reasons why, there's the expectation for men to be the one to initiate, creates like a hostile environment between men. It makes it competitive. In that sense, if you have a damaged, wounded confidence, that's gonna be a lot more relevant to the exchange than it is if, like, a woman has damaged confidence, like, so she might not be able to, like, continue dating. She might have, like, limited performance in terms of, like, the way she can, like, express herself and that sort of thing amid during the date, but, like, they're on the date already. But if a guy has
Hmm.
damaged confidence, he tries to approach someone and say, "Would you like to go out?" He has to do that. In fact, let me tell you something. I try to use Bumble. Like, it is completely worthless. Like, in terms of, like,
I do not like that dating app.
yeah, that dating app sucks, okay? Because, like, I've tried. Do you know how often, like, I have gone, like, you have to, like, you have to more than just, like, so if I match with someone, I have to
Hmm.
then, like, signal that I'm actually even more interested before they'll write something. That's been my experience every time.
So let me just tell you, I've been on all the dating apps,
Yeah.
and I was single for 6 years after my last divorce, and I had a very different experience than what you were describing. And Bumble, I did not ever get one single date, and I was on that thing. I would pop on and then I'd get off, and then I was on again and I would get off. For me, I think having to be the first one to say something was always very intimidating, and I it is.
You don't
I could
say.
not be a man is
What?
what I determined. I was like, "What? You have to like just go up to perfect strangers
What?
and talk to them, and there's all this pressure to like be witty but not too dumb, and
Yeah.
like I couldn't handle it, let me
My
tell
goodness.
you." And so I was
My
like, "Let
goodness.
me
My
just
heart
sit
goes
back
out to you.
and be."
Oh god.
I know, it's so
The
sad,
struggle.
right?
That
Anyway,
hasn't
so
been my
I don't
whole
like
freaking life.
your whole life. Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't understand how men ever have the confidence to go up to a perfect stranger and initiate a conversation. Like, oh, that
You have no
girl's cute. Let me
choice.
go over and talk to her. Yeah,
You have no choice. You'll
it's
die lonely.
crazy. Yeah.
The reason I think that they did sociologists have done studies. They said like the perfect amount of people in a community is about around 200, and then that will
Okay.
produce the most equitable situation apparently, like on average.
Okay.
And it makes sense to me because like whenever you consider like how many options people have nowadays, it
Oh, yeah.
creates a paralysis analysis, you know, and um, I think a lot of people just think I have the whole world I can choose from. You know, does this person like perfectly accommodate all of, you know, is my, and the notion of soulmates and all of that stuff has really I think has wounded uh injured people's perceptions of other
Mm,
people and of their own ability to like grow and compromise and that sort of thing. I feel like back in the day there were, when there were people that were like dysfunctional, we still like, and it was like a time whenever that we couldn't so readily go between communities and cities and things like that. We couldn't travel like we do now. They still found a use for those people. You know, they
yeah.
still made those people a necessary part of the community's, you know, worth and its function. But nowadays, we can just neglect those people. We can just say move them wherever, like make them travel the city between the neighborhoods and live, you know, in the forests and live in the parks and live under in the underpasses and live under and live in the alleyways and that sort of thing because we don't need a use for them. We don't need to have a use for them. And that's reflective, I think, in dating too. We don't need we don't need to do the same thing. We don't need to find the uh, someone that's less than. We want to find the perfect candidate.
There is a sense of that. So I do some coaching on dating after divorce, and there is a sense of, I think for a lot of people, I'm trying to find the one needle in a haystack, my perfect match. And I'm like, listen, in any moment in time, there is an infinite possibility of matches for you that are incredibly perfect in that moment. So we have to get rid of this notion of, I'm looking for the one. Like,
Hmm.
listen, divorced 3 times. There's not the one, but being able to, for me, when I'm coaching people on the dating scene, I'm like, what you need to do is enter each conversation with enjoying this person for who they are. Get to know the person. Can you enjoy a coffee, a dinner, whatever your date is, and just enjoy it for the experience of that and not worry about, is this the perfect person that I'm going to marry one day and do they tick all my boxes? Like, how about you just go and experience and have a good experience and see where it goes? Like,
Hmm.
throw all the expectations out the window. And I think if more people were to do that, then the whole dating experience would be more fun. But I think that's the problem with online dating, is this idea of like sifting and sorting all these real life people, by the way. All these people you're swiping on are like legitimate real life people. Well, okay, so sometimes they're
Most of them.
catfish, but most of them are real people that have feelings and desires, um and being able to just engage with that person on that level. I think if more people were doing that, it would be a much more enjoyable experience.
Yeah, I think it simplifies things. Also, you might maybe. I think hopefully you agree with this, but shared values is a lot more important than shared hobbies. Um,
Hmm.
I found that like you can more readily agree with, you know, someone if they have those values with you, and you might not like the same things, but you will agree in principle on the world around you and the things that you enjoy, and how you enjoy them, and why you enjoy them,
Exactly.
which is much more relevant to harmony than I
Yeah,
think. Than like, do you both like to play tennis? Because two people that like to play tennis can have very different ways of enjoying
exactly.
tennis.
Yes. Yes. And different ways of maneuvering through life.
Hmm.
I think you're hitting on what most people don't even pay attention to. Shared
Mhm.
values is much more important than, I mean, hobbies change all the time.
Mhm.
And I think when you share values, that leaves room for growing and evolving together.
Mhm.
And that's what I think leads to most divorces is this growing and evolving, and one person, whether or not the other person wants to grow and evolve at the same pace is almost irrelevant, but can you support your own growth and that person's growth or non-growth together? That shared values gets you there. Shared hobbies does not.
Shakespeare. Yeah, illness, there's some things that are, like mitigating factors would be something like illness,
Hmm.
which a lot of
Hmm.
people, especially women, I know that, even though I'm someone who suffered from that, who ended up getting divorced because of, my illness, women, experience that, on a apparently much more, uh, often. So whenever, a woman is diagnosed with, like, cancer, I think she has, like, a it's extraordinary. It's something like 70% chance of if she's married that she'll get divorced, that their spouse will leave them.
Ooh, I didn't know that
Yeah,
statistic.
it's
Really?
really you should look into it. I could be wrong about the figure, but it's
Hmm.
higher. It's higher for women than it is
Hmm.
for men, which is strange because, I think that, on average, the divorce rate is far more initiated by, uh, by women than it is by men. That's which is curious.
That is interesting because
Mm,
the figure I always pay attention to is women contemplating divorce. On average, it takes them 2 years to decide,
mhm,
which is a long time for people to sit in what I call limbo. Do I stay or do I go? What am I doing with my life? 2 years is a long time.
mhm.
But yeah, interesting. I didn't think divorce was going to come up so much in our conversation, but I certainly appreciate the man's perspective. It was very helpful.
Mm. The thing is that just being always having to be the initiator and everything. It's interesting because, when you consider the dynamics like that, what we're looking at, like I think the chief complaints that I see is that you know, uh, being aggressive, like sexually aggressive, and that sort of thing, and being hit on in all these different places, like being hit on in places that aren't appropriate.
Hmm.
Or
Listen, this is a
or
whole
they are
thing.
appropriate, but they're not appropriate. It's really it's
You
a
know what it
crapshoot.
is?
It's
It's fucking
impossible.
confusing for a man because here I was listen, I did some dating conversation, like men's perspective, something or other, not too long ago. And these guys were on there talking. Here's the thing. My son, he's 14, and he told me the other day, Mom, you girls are confusing. And I think that about summed it up, right? Because when
Mm,
when you talk about, so these guys were talking about, I don't know how or when it's appropriate for me to approach a woman, because for every woman who says, why don't you just come up to me and talk to me in the grocery store, you've got another woman who says, I'm doing my grocery shopping, don't bother me. That's not
that's
welcome.
exactly it, yeah.
How the hell do you ever know?
Yeah, that's the thing. So, mm, it's impossible. It's impossible to
It's
win.
impossible.
So, because, like, think about how the guy has to initiate the first date, has to initiate the
Yeah.
first conversation, then has to initiate, like, some kind of physical intimacy, like, whether that's, like, a touch on the back or, like, a touch on the arm, like, to indicate, like, there's, like, serious interest romantically in that person. And then after all of that, they have to then get on one knee and initiate marriage. Like, they have to say, "Will you marry me?"
Hmm.
So, like, all of
Hmm.
these things are relying, like, entirely on the notion that men are more sexually, like, aggressive than women.
Hmm.
And it's like it's like it's really strange because it's like I know it's a necessary thing though because you're trying to moderate, like, we're trying to come to, like, some kind of equilibrium where,
Yeah.
like, there's a respectable amount of sexual aggression there, and then
Yeah.
that's but it is it is becoming increasingly difficult for me to tell where that line is. Like, just I mean, I can handle it fine because I just I use dating apps, and Generally, I think a lot of women use dating apps, and and it makes it
It
easier
is.
to.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are using dating apps because they feel like, well, how else am I going to meet someone? I mean, back in my day, you went out, you got drunk at a bar, and that's how you met someone. Well, people don't want to meet that way.
Mm-mm.
We want to be, sober and coherent when we're meeting our future partner.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
the way to go about that, and I think also because the world has expanded, right? We can meet somebody on a dating app that is not just in a 10-mile radius. We can meet
Mhm.
someone who's in another city, or so it expands our options for what's possible. But I think it also, it's like anything, pros and cons, right? So
Mhm.
there's lots of benefits that dating apps bring in terms of, um, you know, I used to work at this company with a bunch of really uh, quite younger people, and it was when I first ventured into online dating for the very first time. And I was having these, you know, late 20s, early 30s coaching me on how to create my profile. And I think at the time I was, oh, I don't know, early 40s. And this one guy, I was like, listen, I don't understand how you're approaching this. You're just swiping on everyone. Like, I'm actually sitting here contemplating, is this the right person or not? And he goes, no, 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 no. We guys, we cast a wide net. You just see what you reel in. And I'm like, uh, oh, it was a very different approach
I tell you,
to how women.
I on a I generally I have I'm someone. I know it's because of the way I look and because of like the things I've done. I've won awards. I'm a Navy veteran. You know, I've written books. I know that I do a lot better on dating apps. So this isn't representative of every guy. When I say that I can generally get like 10 matches a week. No, hold on. For a week it's like 20. I can get like 20 matches a week. Most guys get less than 3
Mhm.
a week,
Yeah,
or
it's
even
because women are
sometimes even
sitting
less.
there looking at profiles, contemplating whether or not they can marry this person based on a profile. And
Yeah,
I'm like, how about you go have a coffee with the guy and get to know him before you decide that?
yeah. And to give you, so my ex, she told me that she got Tinder, and she got Tinder Gold subscription because she wanted to find out, she wanted to meet girls. Okay, this is a hilarious
Okay.
story. This is representative
Okay.
of what it's like. Also,
Okay.
so do you know how many matches she got in
No
a
clue.
single day? In 24 hours, she got 1,500 matches.
What?
1,500.
How did she
1,500.
even swipe that many
No, no,
people?
no. She got no. It's people that liked her.
Oh, I see. I see.
So people that liked her was 1,500 people that liked her. Do you want to guess how many of them were women?
I have no idea.
5.
Really?
Yeah. And do you want to guess how many of the 5 women wrote her
Five
back after she wrote them?
out of 1,500. Oh, I don't know. One or
Uh,
two.
0.
Zero.
None of the girls that liked her wrote her back. All 5 of them ignored her completely.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And she said that the guys that matched with her would write her within 10 seconds. Like generally would write her within 10 seconds of matching with her. And I was like, yeah, that is what it's like. That is what it's like.
Interesting.
That's how much competition we're dealing with. Like I know even women, like I do well like dating and stuff, and I've realized that like you don't, as a guy, you don't get to date someone that's better looking than you. Like it just doesn't happen. It will not happen. But like I see women all the time that like I have gone on dates where I was thinking, I think that maybe we're on different levels in that sense. And this
Hmm.
is a thing that I
Hmm.
think that people, is a reality that no one wants to talk about, but it's true. It is a thing.
Yeah, people, you're right. They don't want to talk about it. So let's talk about it.
Yeah, so like if you're better looking than the person that you're going on a date with, and you're going, but I want to meet this person because I think they're lovely in all these other ways. That only happens in one direction.
Mm.
I've only dated women that I found less attractive. Like okay, so I'll compare them to my ex. I found that were less attractive than the woman I used to be married to. But I've never gone on a date with someone that was better looking than me and my
In-
ex. That's never happened.
Interesting.
That's never happened. The amount of confidence
Interesting.
I love that the amount of confidence that women have these days. Like, it's extraordinary because they feel comfortable talking to someone, like, that would traditionally I think that a lot of people would say that's a mismatch, but they don't but the thing is that it's not relevant always, right? And that's an important thing to like you
Yeah,
talked
I
about earlier.
think, listen, it's not very often that I'm speechless. I'm like sitting here just contemplating. I don't know if women categorize looks to the same degree of importance. Maybe is part of my thought. I don't know where I'm going with this.
No, it's gotta
But
the
also you said that women are more confident now, and I'm like, oh gosh, I don't, based on the people I'm talking to, women don't feel confident at all. And there is, well, and I'll tell you, especially for older women, there is this sense of I'm not as attractive as I used to be, so men won't look at me. That's a whole thing that some women are dealing with. Yeah, I don't know what to say about any of that.
I know, it's the thing is it's heartbreaking for everyone is what I'm getting at. It
Hmm.
sucks for it has different there's pros and cons to all of this.
It is.
Um, it is very superficial, right?
Well, on the dating app, there's no other way around the fact that it's superficial, because
Mhm,
all you're looking at is like on paper qualifications and literally what the person looks like.
mhm,
It's not what I judge based on is the vibe of the person, which you cannot get from a dating profile. So that's why I'm always
mhm,
telling people, like, you need to go have a coffee,
mhm.
because like for me, if I'm going to vibe with that person or not.
Yeah.
And sometimes um there's not a definitive way to describe whether or not it's a yes or a no. It's just how it feels,
Mhm.
which I guess goes back to what we were talking about earlier. This, like, when do you know if it's too much or appropriate? Like, you just kind of have to vibe it out, I guess. I don't know. I'm glad I'm a woman.
Yeah, yeah, in terms of date see, that's the but ultimately, like, all you have to do is look at look at what you said earlier, is that women are better at establishing community, and they're better at supporting
Mhm.
one another because they don't really have to compete with one another. When you don't when you the thing is, whenever you look at, in terms of dating, you don't have to compete with one another, you can, a lot of the women that I've discussed this with, in depth, where you and I are talking right now, I said that if a woman went into the middle of the street and said she was looking for a date, it wouldn't take her very long. Just wouldn't. There would be
Do
someone.
you know how many women need to hear that? So many women need to hear
Yeah.
that, because they feel like they're going to go stand out in the middle of an area and say, I'm looking for a date. And they're going to be standing there holding their hand up still. Like, women are convinced. And I will say, women are better at building community and supporting one another, but there's this other side. It's like light and dark of everything, right? Like, the shadow side of it is a lot of competition and the sense of I am competing with the one next to me, because there's a sense of like we're going after the same person. And it wasn't until I was again in that same dating experience where it was a workshop and we all described our perfect person. And it wasn't until we went around the room and described it that I realized for the first time in my entire life that we were not actually going after the same type of person. We all wanted this very specific,
Mhm.
but very different type of person that I thought,
Yeah.
oh gosh, there isn't any competition, but there is a, a very deep seated sense of competition amongst women that I think is what we're all trying to overcome when we try to build each other up. And there's a whole catty side to women that is not always pretty.
Well, you don't see the thing is you don't see there's not really memes or any kind of stereotypes of men going on dates 7 days a week to get food. Which I don't think that's
No.
true. I don't think those kind of women exist either. They're very far and few in between. The most women are making a concerted and sincere effort to find a partner. But what it does is that it speaks to the availability. So when I say the competition is not the same, it truly isn't because the competition is against number one, the number one thing, which is loneliness. Like you are competing against the notion of being alone for the rest of your life. In that sense, like it doesn't. It's just not the same between men and women, like in that way, and between women even. So between women, between each other, they if they lose access to someone because another woman got the man that they were pursuing,
Hmm.
they can find another man the same day. Like it just won't. It could be the same day, and they find someone else. Um, it's just that men do not have that luxury. They do not. I know this because of like a lot of trial and error. My experience, even with everything that I have going for me, I still get fewer matches than women that are certainly not considered traditionally attractive at all, and they get way more matches than me, and not
It's
even they're not even
interesting.
it's not even in the same sports. They're not playing the same sport as me. Seriously, I'm not trying to be cruel. It's just realistic. I'm serious. It's just there are a lot of men that are.
Listen, I'm going to invite all of the women to listen to this episode who have said the exact opposite. But I think it's really helpful for people to hear this conversation. Um, that's not a lot of women's experience, but I also think you hit on something that's really critical, which is men competing with a sense of loneliness. And
Mhm.
because one of the complaints I hear from divorced women is he's already married again. He's already dating again. He's already met this person. And this happens for a lot of women, and they are the ones who are sad and lonely at home and convinced they can't find a date and convinced they'll never find their person, and having to go to their kid's wedding with their ex and his new wife, and that's very prevalent. But I think for those women, what they have going for them is a deep sense of community. And
Mhm.
the way they fight the loneliness is with their girlfriends, right? Our friend group is our anti-lonely
Yeah.
pill, right? And so that makes sense that is the, well, it also describes why so many men appear to partner so quickly to women. From their perspective, they feel like, oh, my ex-partner's already partnered up again. But if they're competing against that loneliness, that makes sense.
Yeah, it's not against it's certainly not against, like, quality. Yeah, you're not trying to be discerning, I think. There's a number of things that we've talked about that give me a great deal of concern for the future for
Mm.
women and women's equality and, like, gender
Hmm.
equality, and that is, the notion that this dynamic exists, and the more it's known, the more like empowered women feel to like make choices for themselves, and they don't have to like settle and that sort of thing. It's only going to aggravate the rot of these men that are really really toxic and destructive to women's rights. And there's like this what we're looking at right now is a backlash against women because of all this agency and empowerment and confidence they have now. We have Roe v. Wade being repealed. It is so evident that they do not like all of this that's happening
Yep.
right now. I feel like there's something like statistically, I think that most women are pursuing like the top 20% of male candidates for dating. And I don't know how true that is. And so you'll have to look at yourself.
I would like to know how they're figuring this out
Yeah, I
because
know,
it
right?
doesn't
I
feel
know,
true.
I know, I know.
Yeah,
But
interesting
it
work.
also, when I consider it like in a meta sense, when I talk about like my dating experience versus the dating, if I'm getting 20 matches and there's the guy next to me is not getting any, is it because all the women are going for someone that's more like on the level that I've achieved, that I've tried to earn, versus what they've been able to do. So like, I mean, the numbers aren't. I don't think they're totally outrageous. But the thing is, as far as young women anyway, young women like in millennials uh, and Gen Z and stuff.
Hmm.
Uh, the confidence is definitely apparent, and I think that a lot of really jaded men are trying to reestablish control over women, and I'm really 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 concerned for gender equality for that sense. And In fact, like if I had a great deal of success, that's the one thing that I would concentrate on. All the money that if I had charity, if I could do a charity and all that sort of thing, it would be for the maintenance of gender equality, because that is what brings fascism out the most, is gender
Hmm.
equality 100% of the time. There's all these other qualities, but there's, for example, like the one thing that I learned that really gave me pause. This is a fact about World War II, when the Allied troops liberated Paris from the Nazis. That was an extraordinary achievement, of course, liberating the Parisians and all of the people that were living in Paris, of course. But they found that over 3,000 women were raped after that. Look, and it made me wonder, like, what were we really liberating for? And so
Hmm.
it gives me pause. I know men well enough, like in that meta sense, to know that, and the ones that are awful, and the ones that talk about women in these really awful, destructive, and counterproductive ways, that they are going to do everything they can to reestablish, their dominance, because they see it as like defying the sort of natural order.
Hmm.
And it just scares me. It scares me for the future, for that reason.
Yep. Well, and listen, you said earlier you don't know how it will be fixed, or you don't know how to fix it. But I find that these conversations are incredibly valuable in order to do just that. So
Mm.
that's my little part of,
Mm.
you know, resistance, right? Like it is to have the conversations and to talk about the things that a lot of people don't want to talk about. And that's why we have the explicit rating on this podcast, because I want
Mhm.
people to feel open and comfortable to say whatever it is that they want to say, because I think those conversations are the path to do just that. I think the path to change is the first step is talking about it. So,
If I could give advice to men, though, it would be to make friends with women. Like, truly, try to find friends with women that you can, like, really have no ulterior motive, seek none, establish
yeah,
none, have
yeah,
nothing but friendship, and you will learn an extraordinary amount about women, and
it is true. And
about what it is to have a community,
it goes both ways.
because they're better at it.
Yeah.
They're better at it.
Well,
They're better at it, and you'll learn.
the sense of community, I do think women are better at. But I think, you know, it's true. When you befriend the opposite gender, it is a very eye-opening experience, and I think it's a really great learning opportunity for those people who are
Hmm.
really wanting to learn. Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, I think that's great advice. Well, okay, so listen, this was a long conversation and so good. Thank you so much for being with me. But last, I want to make sure that my listeners know how to find you. So how can people find you?
Oh, KristofMorrow.com.
Fabulous.
Yeah, that will lead you to like everything that I have. Oh, this is my book, by the way. I know that you can't see it because it's all audio, but I was just showing you.
Yes. No, I
This is
love
the
it.
this is it.
Well, and
Yeah.
I saw that it oh, it's volume 1 and 2.
Yep.
Okay, fabulous. I had seen it described as an ebook, and I was going to ask if it was on print as well, which clearly it is because I see it.
Hmm.
Amazing.
Hmm.
Okay, well,
Hmm.
I will make sure that everyone can find you. I'll link all of your info, specifically your website, in the show notes. But thank you so much. Listen, I didn't think we were going to talk so much about dating and divorce and men versus women, but I am here for all of those conversations. So thank you for sharing your time and your wisdom.
Thank you, Shauna. You're very kind to have me.
Hey, hey, my friend. Thank you for listening today and for leaving a review. Those reviews mean so much to me and they help this podcast grow. I just love reading them. So if you haven't left one yet, please do. Now listen, are you having your own start again moment? If your next chapter is filled with uncertainty, my new Start Again guide will get you pointed in the right direction. You can download your free guide today at shaunalee.com/startagain.